Thank you for having me. I enjoy this. I want to say the war was great. I really enjoyed it with all the new players. I could help them, and I could, uh,
We can
and it was
return.
a
the
more
prodigal children return.
and it was a more open map. But my question was, what was the idea about the full map compared to having some regions cut out?
Yeah, so I can answer that. So this is something that is kind of hard, sort of to um, it's kind of hard for everyone to like see because it's a lot more of like a developer thing. It's more of like a developer problem. So I don't like blame anyone actually for like feeling the way they do when if some people want a smaller world. I actually really like sympathize with that, and I can see that's a user problem, and that's why it makes it so hard for us because it's a developer problem that is difficult to reconcile with the user problem, and that is with the queues. Like we actually got more players than we thought. We thought the first weekend we'd get to around 7 to 800 players, and then we thought that the week after it it would be less. But it turned out for a week and a half we peaked at like 800 something players almost like every day for a week and a half. And the about a week in, we were actually having a lot of problems with the queues. And this isn't the queue that is enforced when there's like a player imbalance. We're actually having a problem with um, queues because some regions were like locked down, and we knew that this would happen. So when regions are locked down at the border, what happens, and something that we see, and I don't blame anyone because again, this is not hard for like normal players to like see this, but um, what ends up happening is you get tons of players that just want to get into a contested region so they can have some fun, right? And this might not be all players. I can certainly understand some players have a different context. Maybe they're just in the back line, or they're more concerned about something else. But there's a large group of players out there that they just go into the game, they hit the button from the home screen, and they won't necessarily try to go through the tricks of going to a back line and then like running over to the border so that they can get past the queues. Like it gets to the point where there's like sometimes up to 50 people that are sitting there like waiting to try to get into a contested region because there's only, look at it this way. When you peak at like 800 players on like any one of those days, and there are only 2 or 3 of those frontline regions that are open, and every region supports like on average 160 players. You can do the math and see how many players are stuck at the back. They're either stuck at the back, they're waiting, they're not able to go in and have their fun. And we this is something that like we foresee, and it's so hard for us because it's not easy for us to just go to players and be like, look at this problem. Like you should understand this problem because I don't expect anyone to understand this problem because it's a developer problem. But that's the rationale, and in fact, even it, it's always hard because towards the end of the war, then like um, population will usually shrink, and, and then that problem is no longer there, and then and also it gets maybe like a little harder for players towards the end when there's not as many players, and then there's all the problems show up, and then sort of you have the opposite problem then, right? Which is that players feel like there was too much space and then there was not enough players. So this is something that we always try to balance it. So we sort of make a prediction. Okay, how many players are there going to be? We don't want we want to minimize the problems at the beginning of the war, or if there's a sale, and we want to try to minimize the problems that might happen at the end of the war when some players start to like drop off. What is the average experience going to be? And then we try to pick something, and it doesn't always work out. But I think in this past war, it did work out, and moving forward, this is always something that we try to do, and that's the main. There are like other reasons. There are other like secondary reasons I would say on why we do this, but that's like the most like immediate reason on why we do it.
I have a follow-up story with this involving Mark. Last year, you guys remember the Jade Cove War? It was one of the biggest wars we'd ever had in the entire game. 2,000 people. Yeah. Yep. And yeah, of course you guys remember. You did the whole report on. One of the stories you might not have heard was how Mark was sitting there through Christmas, managing the queues, like tearing out his hair because there was 2,000 people in the game and only 3 active front lines. And then there would be this like massive naval invasion because there's like 100 people in the back line that can't get into the front. So naturally they're setting up these naval invasions. And we're sitting there on our hands thinking, oh my God, I hope they succeed. I hope they get just one freaking fort so that it can open up a star and then 150 of these people will drop in there and ease up these queues. That was a very real thing for for Mark and Alcus while they're all through the holiday.
Yikes.
Yep.
Yep.
It's a funny thing, the sandbox.